Network. And today's topic is change the past, change the future. We tend to think of the past as being immutable, and that's really so far from the truth. While the events may be, and that's up for debate, certainly the experience of the events is quite changeable. And by shifting our relationship to the past, we shift our relationship to the present and thereby our potentials in life and into our future. So I think it'll be an interesting conversation to experience a little bit of time travel. And before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding into your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, energizing all your cells and your molecules, your electrons, creating this brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together and very softly rub your fingers against your palms to feel the deliciousness of that sensation, the tickling and tingling, and allow that sensation to bring you present right here, right now, into this marvelous, remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Rosalind. Happy Friday. I love that. I never heard that, Rosalind. Happy Friday. Yay. Good morning. And good morning, Gia. So wonderful to have you here with us this morning. And for everybody else who's joining us, welcome, welcome, welcome. And today we're talking about changing the past to change the future. And, you know, I think we can agree on some level that neither the past, we are residing in the ever-present now. And if we look at that truth, that the only moment is now, the past then resides in this moment simply as a construct, as a memory or a collection of memories and physical experience and emotional pattern. And what I've noticed, a very, very powerful NLP, neuro-linguistic programming technique, is something called timeline therapy. And part of that is being able to, or some aspect of it is being able to go back to an experience in the past and recreate it, reimagine it. Because here's the thing, whatever is past for us in our past, in part of our story, our epic of who we are in this life, resides only in this moment in time. You know, our interpretation of it, our experience of it. Good morning, Jenny. So good to have you here with us. Welcome. So as we're talking about changing the past to change the future. And I had a really great, good morning, Rubin. Welcome. All you guys coming in. It's great to have you all here to celebrate the week and to celebrate the day and to celebrate Friday. And anyway, Um, when so I had a session with a client this week and it was awesome. And this particular person had memories around childhood that, and themselves as a result of their childhood memories, that were really kind of keeping them bound, keeping them limited, and with interpretations of themselves that, you know, as a bumbler, you know, as aimless. And so in this session, we went back in time, and their current self gave their child self all kinds of tools to be engaged with life in an entirely different way. And so they rewrote their history. They found themselves doing things in their vision of their childhood that they hadn't actually done in the physical world. And by creating that new context, that new experience, it shifted their relationship to their childhood. They felt entirely different about their childhood than they had while going through it. And this is just such a fascinating thing, because now their experience of themselves has been completely shifted, which is amazing and very, very, very cool. So Rosalind says, our experience is like evidence appearing as real. What if the past didn't matter? Like Dory the fish from Nemo, who has short-term memory only. Yes, very, very good observation, Rosalind. So the past is the past, and we carry it forward in whatever interpretations and whatever meaning we apply to it. We're constantly recreating the past. And so Rosalind says, so timeline therapy is reframing the past. Part of it is, for sure. Yeah, part of it is being able to perceive the timeline and stand up above it and see things, you know, in a greater context. But part of it is reframing the past. And the thing is that we carry our interpretations of our experience as real. We make them, we interact with our interpretations as if they're the truth. And as a result of those interpretations or memories or whatever, we create this whole dynamic for ourselves that we then live into. And oftentimes that memory is faulty to begin with. And I have some examples of that. That's really, really interesting. It's fascinating to me to be looking at memory. What is memory? What is, you know, what is the past? What is the future? What is the present? You know, like this whole idea of time. So Gia says, I have panic attack memory and I feel anxiety again. How can you change it or let it be? So with panic attack memory, let's see, I'm wondering if the thing that triggers you or triggered that panic attack, is that something that still triggers you? Because it could be a way to be reinterpreting whatever that thing is that was the trigger. And it may be that you can look at whatever that panic attack was potentially, and I don't know the details, so please, you know, please leave some latitude here and don't take what I'm saying as a prescription per se. But if we imagine that every behavior has a positive intention, it may be that the panic attack is like putting you on high alert to say, hey, pay attention to this. You know, like maybe there are aspects that you didn't pay attention to previously, perhaps, and your other than conscious is really trying to get your attention. Sometimes a panic attack can be, well, probably most times, a panic attack can be sort of a confluence of a bunch of different factors that come together, and the other than conscious mind just wigs out and says, okay, that's enough. Like this, I'm not, it's too much. Oftentimes, and this is interesting, I think, is that the panic attack seems to be prompted by situation that isn't related to the moment in which the panic attack occurred. So all these stressors building up, and then there's a moment where it culminates in a panic attack. And then what happens is, because that's such a heightened state of being, the circumstances of the moment in which the panic attack takes place become associated with the panic attack. So what's happening is, you had all these inputs that were creating stress, and at one point the body just says, okay, that's enough, and then here's the panic attack. But then let's say, while I have the panic attack, I'm driving, right? So I have to pull over and address the panic attack. Well, then what happens is that the panic attack dynamic gets associated with driving too. So then driving creates all kinds of anxiety. And then if there's another panic attack when I'm walking out the front door, then maybe leaving the house creates greater anxiety. And you can see where this gets built and built and built. And what we want to be able to do is to denature that. Instead of expanding it, we want to be able to untangle it and separate those individual pieces that have then become all wired together in some kind of jumbled, tangled mess that that kind of took us away from what the original incitement was, if that makes any sense, the original trigger. So I think it's, if we can potentially reframe the notion or the story around what happened with a panic attack, then we shift our relationship to it, right? And that's the whole idea here. I mean, maybe one idea is that you could do what this client did, is to go back to that moment and go back as an observer. Don't go back into the panic attack. Observe the panic attack. Observe, like even from a distance, and if that's still too reactive, imagine yourself in a movie theater watching a movie of it. And if you're in the audience and it's too reactive to see it on screen, you can imagine yourself in the film room. This is when we were really running films, or in the computer room or whatever, and imagine that you're the one that's projecting the screen, and instead of watching the screen, you can watch yourself sitting in the audience watching the screen. So what we're talking about is creating some remove enough to be able to reframe the experience. So maybe you would be able, instead of seeing yourself having responded to the panic, what you might be able to do is to see the panic coming on and be able to shift it into, as the emotion is arising, shift it into an awareness. Is like, oh, I get to choose to move into a different situation. I get to, whatever that thing was that was the stressor, maybe I get to create a different outcome. Or again, this is with neurolinguistic programming, you can add a funny soundtrack. You could turn the images to black and white. You could play it backwards. You could change the voices. You can shift what are called submodalities to shift the impact of the experience in the first place. And if it's a feeling state, perhaps you can even shift the feeling from panic to excitement. So I don't know if any of this is helpful, but what we want to realize is that our memory is not necessarily accurate. And this is a really interesting thing happened yesterday with me and my mom. I was taking her to a doctor, and we'd been there so many times, I can't even tell you. And both of us thought that the doctor was on the third floor. We got off the elevator at the third floor, walking down the hallway, and it was like being in the Twilight Zone, because it didn't look like the floor we were supposed to be on. And we were both certain that we were on the right floor. And as it turned out, the doctor was on the fourth floor, but both of us had the memory somehow that the doctor was on the third floor. And it was bizarre. It was bizarre. So memory is not necessarily in any way accurate. So Gia says, Robin says, B situation is causing C present to fuel A past. So I love the mathematical formula. So there's a situation in the present that is then potentially reinforcing our experience from the past, and we do this all the time too. Is like some of us come up with a conclusion that I'm a loser. And so we have all this evidence in the past to validate that idea. And then something happens in the present, and we use that to bolster our idea that, see, my conclusion about being a loser that I have all this past evidence for is true, because it's validated by this moment also. It's craziness, right? And we can use it the other way, or another way, where we can say, you know what? I'm determined, and I triumph, and my persistence, it creates awesome results in my life and in the world. And that's the way it's been in the past. And here's another situation now. And that strengthens my idea that my persistence is a vehicle to achieving my desired ends. That's we can use these things for good or for ill, right? But the thing to realize is that it's mutable, and we make it up, that we can impact it. So Gia says, I see, Mira, that my present situation has nothing to do with my fear, and that I understand that these are feelings getting attached to present moment and thoughts, so I can understand it better. That's beautiful, 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 Gia. So when we say that the fear is not in this moment, what's happening is you're carrying that fear forward from an interpretation of something that occurred in the past in some way. And so these feelings are getting attached to present moment and thoughts, so I can understand it better. So we can understand better that we're attaching these feelings and thoughts to the present moment. And we can understand it better also through the feelings and thoughts that we're bringing into the present moment. So one of the biggest gifts is the ability and the awareness to be able to step back and to sort of see things as an observer. Obviously, we don't want to just be observers in our lives, but when we step back and give ourselves the gift of being an observer on occasion, it can create context for ourselves and allows us the fluidity and the facility to shift our experience. Fear, false evidence appearing real, as Rosalind was saying. I believe it was Rosalind that was saying that. To a great degree, is a projection. Especially when we become fearful of the fear, or fearful of another emotion, for example. And Robin says, maybe not relative to this situation, A, B, C, and sometimes D. Yes, so we're talking about equations for life, right, Robin? I think when we look at our beliefs, we often interact with our beliefs as if they are truth rather than hypotheses. And we mentioned earlier this week about how beliefs can shift. Beliefs, perceptions, awarenesses, contexts, all of it shifts over time, as does our past. So another experience with memory, this was so interesting. Again, with my mom, we were talking about a conversation that we had had. She didn't recollect the conversation, nor did she recollect the thing that had prompted the conversation. And I was remembering specifics about the conversation. And then she said, well, there are other things you haven't remembered or remembered accurately. And I said, yes, absolutely. And what was very interesting too is, it goes both ways. I saw that there were things that I'm not remembering accurately. And very interestingly, I had a friend that I traveled around the world with, or traveled to different places in the world with, for several years at least. We were really, really close friends. And my mom had no recollection of this person at all. So it's very, very interesting, how when memory shifts, our experiences of ourselves shift, our definitions of ourselves shift, our definitions or our perspectives of others shift. It's remarkable. So Robin says, if you have given the time to the situation that is causing the anxiety, claim the victory, you've addressed it, and it will not claim any more of your precious time. Claim it. Talking to the mirror also. Indeed, indeed, indeed. So this is a really big thing, Robin, and thank you for bringing it up. When, let's say, there's an experience in our past that we feel shameful about, or we feel guilty about, or we feel victimized about, when we take ownership of that situation. And I'm not saying, please understand, I'm not saying that if you experienced victimization by another, that you were not victimized. I'm not saying that at all. And when we step out of the identification with that victimization, we step into a space of empowerment when we can own it as an important and integral part of our beingness, of the story of who we are, of who we have become and are becoming. Then we have empowerment. It's very much like folks who have had cancer, rather than feeling at the effect of having had cancer, to be a cancer survivor. I see challenges with being a survivor because it's still identifying yourself with the cancer, like it's still affirming the cancer. And at the same time, it's also recognizing that there's been a profound triumph, and that's powerful and positive and empowering. So Kimberly says, have a wonderful weekend. Yes, everybody, wishing everybody a wonderful weekend, but I'm going to keep going for a few more minutes here. It's great. I don't know if you're just chiming in there. Yes, so welcome, Kimberly. It's so good to have you here with us, as always. So Gia says, thank you so much, Robin and Mira. I'm loving it. Please continue. It seems so peaceful. That's awesome, Gia, especially, you know, like you brought up the idea of the panic attack. Part of it is maybe there's a way to rename it rather than calling it a panic attack. Maybe there's a like high alert from my body, or maybe there's another way to contextualize that experience, you know, by calling it something else, by reframing the reference to it, that also can help to shift the quality of the experience itself. So Robin says, my mom is 94 years young and we also have the same issues. Oh, there's no such thing as late, Kimberly. And also know that this is recorded, so you get to go back and watch it if you want to. Anyway, so the thing is that the issue of memory is not just a function of age. You know, it's fascinating to me. Like, here's an example. My brother, my aunt, years and years ago, when we were kids, little kids, went out west. And I've told this story before, but I just love it because it's such a vivid and brilliant example of memory. She went out west and she saw a bear and she described the story. And my brother was a little kid, and he, in his mind, he made it so vivid. And in his mind, you know, he climbed up this tree and he saw the bear, and, you know, he experienced it. And for years and years and years, and probably to this day, if you asked him if it really happened, he would say, I know it didn't, but I actually know it did. Because, you know, like, he believed for years and years that he was there and that he climbed up the tree to escape the bear. And that was the truth of his memory, you know. And even though we told him and he came to believe that, you know, it wasn't true, his experience still told him it was. And so this is the power of memory and the mutability of our awareness. And so we can change the past, again, because the past exists only in this moment. At least our experience of it exists only in this moment. And so we do get to rewrite history. In fact, the history books are being written and rewritten all the time. You know, they say about history that it's written by the winners, by the victors, or by those in power. And we're seeing that now as the balance of power is shifting a bit, as we're becoming more inclusive. We're seeing that there are more stories emerging into more collective consciousness that incorporate peoples that were disempowered by the powers in force. You know, we're seeing more stories about Black history. We're seeing more stories about Indigenous people. And this is because we are hopefully, however slowly, moving toward a more inclusive consciousness. I'm just going to say that, and maybe that's overly hopeful, but, you know, I think that that's where we're headed. In any case, that's it for today on this Friday. So I wish you a marvelous weekend, and I invite you to look at the places in your past that you can perhaps shift your experience around to enliven and enrich and embolden and strengthen you. So That's it for this morning. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live each weekday morning here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, EWN, One with the Earth, Enlightened World Living. And I just love you so much and have such gratitude and appreciation for you and for this time we spend together. I so look forward to seeing you again here really soon. Have a great weekend.